They were pretty close, but the Patriots had the win edge. And we always bang on the Patriots for that soft schedule.
Yeah.
For the softest schedule the league has had by any
right.
team this century. And KW just slipped in there. It's like Bills basically played the same schedule.
That's true.
Except for...
Yes, they did.
First
It was
place
bas-
versus fourth.
Yeah, it was basically the same.
I'm just going to, they finished one game separate in the standings. And you're right, for 14 of the 17 games, they had the same schedule. Here were the three differences.
Yeah, let's see them.
When the Bills had the Philadelphia Eagles, the Patriots had the New York Giants. When the Bills had the Houston Texans, the Patriots had the Tennessee Titans.
Okay.
And when the Bills had the Kansas City Chiefs, the Patriots had the Las Vegas Raiders.
Okay.
Even if the Chiefs...
There's two games.
What do you mean?
The Chiefs is a huge difference.
I hate to say it, the
Raiders?
Chiefs are not a huge difference.
Really?
The Raiders had the number one pick in the draft.
Mahomes?
We lost to the Raiders,
Was
first of all,
Mahomes
so throw that up. Yes, Mahomes.
For that game?
Yes.
Yes, Mahomes was healthy.
There's no difference?
Mahomes had a losing record as a starter this year. I'm just saying there are two AFC West teams that did not make the playoffs.
Yes, that part they are similar, but to say there is no difference is disingenuous.
You got caught.
I mean,
there's two buckets. There's teams that made the playoffs. You put Drake May into two buckets. He can beat winning.
That's
fine. Can beat losing teams. Can't beat winning teams.
KW, that's fine. Then call. If you want to sit here on national TV and say the Chiefs and the Raiders are the same, you don't think the Texans and the Titans are.
No,
and you don't think the
different.
Eagles and the Giants are.
But when we played the Texans, we won. Yeah, and when Josh Allen played the Texans, he lost.
So the point that I am making is, I do think it is fair to say that last year, when they were that close, and in my opinion, had that difference of that three-game sample, that had you simply flipped the schedules, maybe the Patriots are 12-5 and the Bills are 13-4. Maybe it's worth a one-game difference.
That's fair.
So then, like, it is not. You know, I would, if we were making the case, who do you trust more, the Chiefs or the Broncos, going into this year? I trust the Chiefs more. But that's an 8-game delta in wins. The Broncos won 14, the Chiefs won 6. You really have to chalk a lot of last year up to down year for the Chiefs, perfect year for Denver. Bills and Pats were much, much closer. So then, to me, the Bills, each of the last 6 years, have won 11 or more games and at least made the divisional round. Now that the Chiefs streak is over, they have the longest streak of seasons with a playoff win. They are, just to me, flatly, KW, more trustworthy than the New England Patriots. You could argue, depending on how you feel about the Chiefs and the Eagles this year, the Bills might be the most trustworthy team in the league as far as having a rock-solid season.
This is genuinely one of the more fascinating discussions I've had the chance to be a part of. The way it kicked off was a little bit, well, let's just say it leaned into the familiar territory of embracing our own preconceived notions and obvious partialities, which, you know, is par for the course in these circles. But setting that aside, the dialogue itself has evolved into something really worthwhile, and I'm truly grateful for the exchange. That said, you can't help but notice the mental gymnastics, the almost subconscious Jedi-level tricks you have to navigate when you're processing everything through the lens of a devoted fan, through a perspective that is inherently skewed. And that, again, circles back to a point I hammer home constantly. It functions as a kind of necessary reset, a recurring reminder of why, regardless of the faith you follow, the spiritual path you walk, or the personal philosophy you embrace, you find yourself returning to the same foundational texts, reabsorbing the same core principles over and over. It's the same reason we need to be constantly reminded of basic decency: treat others well, respect their property, don't take what isn't yours. The human condition necessitates these recurring prompts, these anchors to keep us grounded. That's precisely why I make it a point, especially in that neat little opening spiel I give, to ask you to hit that subscribe button, to commit to watching the entirety of the video, so we can collectively foster most impartial, well-reasoned, and transparent conversations possible. It's a priority that needs to be at the very forefront of our minds at all times, a principle that requires relentless reinforcement. I mention this less frequently, but it's a mantra I operate by. You are entirely free to push back against my viewpoints, to challenge every take I present without reservation. I never posture as the ultimate authority, the oracle with all the definitive answers or the most flawless prognostications. My genuine aim is to cultivate a space where, irrespective of the topic, we can engage in a balanced, accurate examination from all angles, meticulously laying out every possible argument and counterargument. Now, applying this framework to the Buffalo Bills is where things get exceptionally compelling, because you're all well aware of my stance. I hold Josh Allen as the premier quarterback in the entire National Football League. That's arguably my most vocal, unwavering declaration, the one I proclaim with absolute conviction and full-throated certainty. Josh Allen is the best. Josh Allen is the best. Josh Allen is unequivocally the best. Yet, I find myself fundamentally at odds with the reasoning employed, particularly by Nick in this instance, to arrive at certain conclusions. The assertion that the Bills have demonstrated greater consistency than the Patriots over the past several years is, on the surface, statistically accurate, but the underlying logic is flawed. Well, of course they have. The Patriots were mired in organizational chaos. They lacked a franchise quarterback, they lacked their long-standing head coach, and they were navigating the inevitable, painful growing pains that accompany a major transitional period. To juxtapose that current Patriots squad with the one that was led by Bailey Zappe is a comparison that simply doesn't compute for me. It lacks any logical coherence. It's a reference point I discard entirely because it holds no weight. Even the persistent fixation on team records versus opponents with winning records, and all those ancillary statistical measures, while they certainly have their place and are aspects I routinely analyze and discuss, need to be viewed with a discerning eye. It was a realization that crystallized for me early in the 2024 season, which marked my first genuine, full campaign of producing content, and it underscored just how heavily I prioritize the nuances of strength of schedule, the overall quality of the opposition, and the caliber of play within those specific matchups. I recall receiving immediate pushback, with people insisting that this isn't college football, that style points don't matter, and while that's true in a sense, this nuanced evaluation is the very pathway to uncovering the truth about a team's identity. It's never purely about wins and losses. If it were that binary, we'd simply rank teams by their records, and the best record would invariably triumph over the lower record, lead. To a Super Bowl that always pits the number 1 seed against the number 1 seed. We know with absolute certainty that this is not how the league operates. The fact that this isn't the reality immediately invalidates the argument that record alone is a definitive indicator of a team's quality. If it were, we'd see that matchup most of the time, and we simply don't. So, when we pivot to the question of which franchise, the Bills or the Patriots, I trust more heading into this season, the conversation becomes incredibly nuanced and complex. On one hand, I unequivocally trust Josh Allen more than any other single player in the league. But do I harbor that same trust in the Bills as an institution? No, I don't, and I haven't for a long time. I genuinely commend their turnaround, the impressive feat of transforming from a dysfunctional outfit into a consistently competitive, top-tier franchise. I respect that journey, I celebrate it, and I love seeing that kind of success story unfold. However, I do not possess an unwavering, unconditional faith in the Buffalo Bills front office, coaching staff, or their decision-making processes. In reality, there are only a handful of franchises that inspire that level of confidence. Nick alluded to the Eagles or the Chiefs, and I would add the Rams to that shortlist as well. For my money, the most consistent organizations in the league right now, in terms of infrastructure and operational excellence, are the Eagles, the Rams, and the Chiefs. And I would make a strong case that the Chiefs hold the top spot, given that within their current championship window, they've secured multiple Super Bowl titles with entirely different offensive coordinators and, most remarkably, with a completely different quarterback situation if you look at their broader success. I want to be crystal clear, I'm speaking purely from an organizational standpoint here. This isn't a debate about Patrick Mahomes' individual brilliance, that's a separate discussion altogether. We are strictly examining the foundational bones of the franchise, the ownership, the general manager, the scouting department, the coaching pipeline, the entire ecosystem that operates as a cohesive unit. To illustrate, if the Chiefs were to lose Mahomes and Andy Reid tomorrow, the reaction would be one of panic and uncertainty. Conversely, if the Eagles lost Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, the collective response would be far more measured. They would simply reset, having navigated such transitions countless times before with remarkable success. The Rams would exhibit a similar resilience. That distinction is what separates the truly elite organizations from the rest. This brings me to Josh Allen, who is the singular, monumental reason for the Bills' radical transformation. His impact is so profound that it's difficult to compare to many other franchises. Joe Burrow has certainly had a similar effect in Cincinnati, but the Bengals did have a sliver of momentum before High's arrival. It wasn't top tier, but it existed. For the Bills, the situation was arguably more dire before Allen. Honestly, though, that's a bit of a toss-up depending on how you evaluate those earlier years under coaches like Dick Joran and the like, or even with players like Carson Palmer's tenure in Cincy. The Chiefs, of course, had a solid, winning foundation with Alex Smith. The Ravens won a Super Bowl a handful of years prior to Lamar Jackson taking over, so they had a recent championship pedigree. While I acknowledge that the Bills did make the playoffs with Sean McDermott and Tyrod Taylor, I believe the stark reality is that without Josh Allen, this team is fundamentally adrift. I stated this emphatically last season, and I stand by it. Without Josh Allen under center, the Buffalo Bills don't sniff the playoffs. That's an irrefutable fact. The colossal weight that Josh Allen carries on his shoulders, year after year, is nothing short of extraordinary. Now, when you compare that organizational dependency to the Patriots, viewing it from a purely franchise-level perspective, the picture shifts. Obviously, Bill Belichick and Tom Brady are no longer in the building, so the landscape is vastly different. But historically, the Patriots have a significantly longer and more proven track record of constructing competitive rosters, supporting their coaching staff, and developing players across the board. The Buffalo Bills, to be quite frank, have struggled for years to achieve that same level of holistic organizational competence. Look no further than the Eagles for the perfect, textbook example of how a well-run franchise operates. It was a prudent move for the Bills to acquire Stephon Diggs, for instance. However, the relationship soured, and Diggs, being a prototypical high-maintenance wide receiver, a type that Tom Brady recently criticized, had to be moved on from, which was the correct and understandable decision. I don't fault the Bills for that at all. But they have done a remarkably poor job of replacing his production, and that's not hyperbole. The Eagles, in stark contrast, made a brilliant move by acquiring A.J. Brown, maximizing his output, reaching 2 Super Bowls, and winning one. And when the time came to move on from him, they were already prepared. Their off-season maneuvers to acquire players like Jahan Dotson, and make other key signings, demonstrated a proactive transformation. They declared that while they were moving on from Brown, they were going to do every single thing in their power to replace that production immediately. They didn't like the trajectory of their offense, so they brought in a new coach to install a brand new system. They were dissatisfied with their defense, so they invested heavily in Vic Fangio, who took that unit from the bottom of the league to a top-tier defense that propelled them to a Super Bowl victory. These are concrete, decisive organizational wins that the Buffalo Bills have consistently failed to replicate. Examine both scenarios, both had a talented but volatile star receiver. One team replaced him with relative ease and continued their upward trajectory, while the other has not, and the evidence is clear. They are now scrambling to trade for players like DJ Moore, which underscores the point. I also believe that Sean McDermott has been a fundamental problem for this franchise, and they have simply kept running it back with him year after year. Again, that is not the modus operandi of a franchise like the Philadelphia Eagles. I remember after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, I called out the Bills, noting that many Josh Allen fans were quick to say that Allen is superior to Jalen Hurts, and that Hurts just has a superior supporting cast. My response was simple: that may very well be true. So, build a better team. Be a better franchise. That was my immediate thought. If you're claiming your quarterback is better, prove it by creating an environment that doesn't force him to do everything himself. Build a defense that can rise to the occasion. We witnessed what the Eagles' defense accomplished against the Kansas City Chiefs in the same playoff run the Bills were in. Which defense stepped up? The Eagles had 2 rookies making massive impacts, players like Nakobe Dean and others that people had written off or barely even knew, and a secondary featuring C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who wasn't a top commodity, and Darius Slay, who was considered to be on his last legs. Yet they went out, built that defense, and won it all. 4 of their key defensive contributors were new acquisitions, including rookies Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. They had a new coordinator. They made concrete moves, including the monumental signing of Saquon Barkley. That's a lot of transformative decisions. If we just focus on the defensive comparison, look at what that Eagles defense did against the Chiefs, versus what the Bills defense did against them. It's not even close. Those are the hallmarks of organizational success versus organizational failure. So, when considering which team I trust more this season, the Patriots have a historic legacy of being an impeccably run organization. The Bills have been salvaged by the singular brilliance of Josh Allen. Does Allen's incredible talent outweigh the deficiencies of the franchise? I don't think so. If Josh Allen were with Sean McVay on the Los Angeles Rams right now, the league would be all but over. The next point is that there were concrete coaching hires the Bills could have made but didn't. They could have gone after Ben Johnson. They could have hired Jim Harbaugh. They could have had Mike Vrabel. Now, they could have had Harbaugh. I'm referring to the Chargers' Harbaugh, whom I believe is a far superior coach to John Harbaugh, and I don't think it's particularly close. I don't care who has a Super Bowl ring. They chose to retain McDermott, arguably a year too late, and it's a precarious situation. Vrabel went to New England. Andy immediately turned that defense around, making smart moves, bringing in players from the Eagles, and transforming that unit into a powerhouse, which it hadn't been in prior years. So, the Bills failed to make those decisive moves, and without Josh Allen, they'd be in serious trouble, and they know it. The players know it. They absolutely know it. Just listen to what they say, listen to the way they speak about him. They are fully aware. I'm genuinely excited to see what this season holds, particularly to see what Joe Brady does as a full-fledged head coach. I've said this a million times, I understand he's just a promoted coordinator, but it's different because he now has greater influence over the culture and practice habits. His conversations with Josh Allen will carry more weight because he is the head coach, not just the coordinator. He has more control. There were times when Sean McDermott could get on the headset and dictate specific play calls, and now he won't have that level of oversight, so it will be fascinating to see if the play calling and game planning evolve. I'm optimistic. However, the term trust is a tricky one. It's a complex and loaded word. But those are my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you all think about the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots? Who do you trust more this season? Let me know your thoughts. I read every single comment, whether you agree or disagree. Let's get into some discussions, get into some RESP. Actful debates, but ultimately, let's have some fun. Please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would love to see you be a part of it. I want to build something we all feel genuinely connected to and excited to be a part of. I think we are well on our way to doing just that. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.